In the year 1520, the most powerful man on earth broke a 400-year-old rule. He did the one thing no Ottoman Sultan had ever done before him. He got married. And that single decision would reshape an empire, destroy a dynasty, and haunt him until his dying breath. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. The woman he married wasn't a princess. She wasn't nobility. She was a slave. And by the time she was finished, she would become the most powerful woman the Ottoman Empire had ever seen. So who were the women in Suleiman's life? And how did one of them manage to do what no woman before her had ever accomplished? Let's start with what you need to understand about the Ottoman harem. Forget everything Hollywood has taught you. The harem wasn't some pleasure palace of dancing women. It was a ruthlessly efficient political machine. The word harem itself comes from the Arabic word for forbidden or sacred. This was the private quarters of the Sultan, and it operated under strict hierarchies, complex rules, and deadly competition. Ottoman sultans didn't marry. That was the tradition. They took concubines, women who could bear them children but held no legal status as wives. This wasn't cruelty, it was strategy. A sultan with a wife meant a sultan with in-laws. It meant family obligations, political entanglements, and competing loyalties. The Ottomans had watched European kingdoms tear themselves apart over marriages and inheritance disputes. They wanted none of it. So when a young slave girl arrived in Constantinople around 1520, no one could have predicted what would happen next. Her name was Alexandra Lisovska, though the Ottomans would call her Hurrem, the cheerful one. European diplomats called her Roxolana. She came from Ruthenia in what is now western Ukraine, captured by Crimean Tatars during a slave raid. She was perhaps 15 years old. She was given as a gift to the new Sultan, Suleiman, who had just ascended to the throne at age 25. Now Suleiman already had a woman in his life. Her name was Mahidevran Sultan, and she had already given him something priceless, a son. Prince Mustafa was born around 1515, and he was everything an Ottoman prince should be. Strong, intelligent, beloved by the Janissaries. Mahidevran's position seemed unassailable. She was the mother of the heir apparent. In the Ottoman system, that made her the most important woman in the empire. And then Hurrem arrived. The sources from this period describe Hurrem as not particularly beautiful, at least not in the conventional sense. The Venetian ambassador Bragadin wrote that she was young but not beautiful, although graceful and petite. But every single source agrees on one thing. She was captivating. She could sing, she could dance, she could make the Sultan laugh. In a court of formal protocol and rigid hierarchy, she was a breath of fresh air. Suleiman was smitten, completely, utterly smitten. Within months, Hurrem had given birth to a son, Mehmed, then another, Mihrima, a daughter, then Abdullah, then Selim, then Bayezid, then Cihangir, 6 children in rapid succession. This was extraordinary. Ottoman sultans typically had one child with each concubine, then moved on. It was a system designed to prevent any one woman from gaining too much power. Suleiman shattered that precedent, but Mahidevran wasn't going quietly. The two women despised each other, and around 1533, their rivalry exploded into violence. According to multiple sources, including the reports of foreign ambassadors, Mahidevran physically attacked Hurrem. She scratched her face, pulled her hair, and beat her badly enough to leave visible marks. When Suleiman summoned Hurrem that evening, she refused to come. She sent a message saying she couldn't appear before him in such a state. Suleiman was furious. He summoned Mahidevran and demanded an explanation. Her response was defiant. She told him that she was the mother of the heir, that she had every right to discipline a rival concubine. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Suleiman banished Mahidevran from the capital. She was sent to Manisa with Prince Mustafa, effectively exiled. She would never return to Constantinople while Suleiman lived. She would never see him again. And then Suleiman did the unthinkable. Sometime around 1533 or 1534, the exact date is debated by historians, Suleiman legally married Hurrem Sultan, a full Islamic wedding ceremony. She became his wife, his only wife, the first legal wife of an Ottoman sultan in nearly 4 centuries of empire. Try to understand how shocking this was. Imagine a sitting president suddenly declaring that he's abolishing Congress. Imagine the Pope announcing he's converting to Buddhism. That's the level of institutional rupture we're talking about. Ottoman ambassadors abroad were embarrassed. They didn't know how to explain it. The Janissaries were confused and angry. The religious scholars were uncertain whether it was even permissible. But Suleiman didn't care. He was in love. And Hurrem understood exactly what she had achieved and how precarious her position remained. Because even though she was now the Sultan's wife, her sons were not first in line for the throne. Mustafa was. Mahidevran's son, the golden prince that everyone loved. For 20 years, Hurrem worked to secure her children's future. She wrote letters to Suleiman constantly. Hundreds have survived. They're remarkable documents, full of passion, intelligence, and political acumen. She called him my sultan, my dearest love, my brightest moon, my intimate companion. But she also kept him informed about events in the capital while he was on campaign. She was his confidant, his advisor, his partner in rule. She had a mosque built in her name, the Haseki Sultan Mosque, the first time a woman who was born a slave had ever been so honored. She founded soup kitchens, hospitals, schools. She ransomed Christian slaves. She corresponded with foreign rulers, including King Sigismund of Poland. She was, in everything but title, co-ruler of the Ottoman Empire. But there was still Mustafa. Did you know that in Ottoman succession there was no rule of primogeniture? Any son could become sultan, and the way you prevented civil war was simple. When a new sultan took the throne, he executed all his brothers. This was called the law of fratricide, and it was official policy. So for Hurrem, Mustafa wasn't just a rival to her sons. He was their death sentence. If Mustafa became sultan, her boys would be strangled with a silk cord. In 1553, the unthinkable happened. Suleiman ordered the execution of Prince Mustafa. The details are horrifying. Mustafa was summoned to his father's tent during a military campaign. When he entered, he found not his father, but a group of executioners. He fought. According to witnesses, he fought desperately for his life. But he was overpowered and strangled. Was Hurrem responsible? The historical sources are divided. The Grand Vizier at the time, Rustem Pasha, who was married to Hurrem's daughter Mirima, had presented Suleiman with evidence that Mustafa was plotting rebellion. Many historians believe this evidence was fabricated, but others argue that Mustafa really was becoming dangerously popular and that Suleiman made the decision himself. What we know is this. Hurrem's enemies blamed her completely. Mahidevran, when she heard the news, cursed Hurrem and swore vengeance. The Janissaries nearly revolted. Poets wrote verses condemning the Sultan's cruelty, and Suleiman, by all accounts, was devastated. He had killed his own son. Hurrem didn't live to see the final outcome of her ambitions. She died in 58, probably from illness, though some sources suggest poison. Suleiman was heartbroken. He built her a magnificent tomb next to the Suleimaniya Mosque and visited it constantly. He wrote poetry mourning her loss. He never took another wife, never even took another concubine. For the last 8 years of his life, the most powerful man on earth slept alone. Her son Selim eventually became sultan. He was called Selim the Sot because of his love of wine. He was not a great ruler, but he was her son, and he lived. Here's what strikes me about this story. Hurrem Sultan started with nothing, less than nothing. She was property. She was a teenage girl ripped from her homeland, sold in a slave market, and given to a man she'd never met. And through intelligence, charm, political genius, and yes, ruthlessness, she rose to become one of the most powerful people of the 16th century. Was she a villain? Many of her contemporaries thought so. Was she a feminist icon ahead of her time? Some modern scholars argue that. But maybe those categories are too simple. Maybe she was just a woman navigating an impossible system, doing whatever she had to do to survive, and to ensure her children survived. Suleiman, the Magnificent, ruled for 46 years, the longest reign in Ottoman history. He conquered Belgrade, Rhodes, and Baghdad. He was a poet, a goldsmith, and a lawgiver. But ask any historian what defined his reign, and they'll mention Hurrem, the slave who became an empress, the concubine who became a wife, the woman who changed everything. 400 years of tradition. She broke it all. So here's my question for you. Do you think Hurrem was a villain who manipulated her way to power and destroyed innocent lives? Or was she a survivor who played the only game available to her and played it better than anyone? Let me know in the comments. And if this story made you think differently about the Ottoman Empire, consider subscribing because we've got a lot more where this came from.